Hi, my name is Andrew Duppstadt. I'm the Education and Interpretation Supervisor for North Carolina Historic Sites. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the USS Underwriter Expedition. As you see on the panel here, the USS Underwriter Expedition was the naval portion of a Confederate attempt to retake New Bern from the Union occupiers late January and early February of 1864. Now, one of the reasons that this is a little known event in Civil War history is because the larger operation failed miserably. The Army never really made a good effort to try to retake the town. But the USS Underwriter Expedition as a naval action was extremely successful. The naval party that undertook the expedition against the USS Underwriter was gathered right here in Kinston. And it included crew members from the CSS Neuse, as well as Confederate officers and sailors from all over the South. Sailors came in here from Charleston, Savannah, Norfolk, Richmond, all over the place, Wilmington even. And the total combined force under the command of John Taylor Wood was around 220 enlisted and officers. And there were even some Confederate Marines on that expedition as well. So they gathered here at Kinston and they went downriver in small boats and launches with the intention of finding whatever Union vessel might be in the river that they could attack and capture. The idea was to capture a Union vessel, bring it back to Kinston, and then use it in tandem with the CSS Neuse to undertake further naval operations downriver. They descended the river on February 1st and made a reconnaissance around the area, and they found one Union vessel anchored off of the forts at New Bern, the USS Underwriter. The attack took place around 2 a.m. on February the 2nd. It was a cold night, it was a rainy night, the weather was miserable. The attack took place in two columns. One column of Confederates hit one side of the ship while the other column went around and hit the opposite side. Now you got to understand the Confederate force was vastly larger in number because the USS Underwriter was at anchor, and therefore about half of her crew was on shore. There were 220 Confederates attacking about 40 or 50 Federals on the USS Underwriter. The fighting was brutal. It was hand-to-hand combat. It was extremely hard, brutal fighting. But within about 15 minutes, the Confederates had captured the ship. This is where the plan changed, because once they got on board the ship and got below deck, they realized that there was no fire in the boilers and they wouldn't be able to move the ship anytime soon. Also, soldiers inside the Union forts on the riverbank realized what was happening, and they opened fire with their artillery pieces on the USS Underwriter, trying to repel the Confederates. So at this point, Wood and his officers decide that they need to destroy the Underwriter and then get back upriver, which they effectively did. They set the USS Underwriter on fire. When the fire reached her powder magazine, the ship blew up and sank in the river right there at New Bern. A lot of the artifacts here in the case behind me came from the wreck of the USS Underwriter. They were recovered by the North Carolina Underwater Archaeology Unit in later years. So we're really lucky to have this artifact record of probably the most exciting event that most of the sailors from the CSS Neuse took part in during the entire war. Now, once the raid was over and the naval party came back to Kinston, most of those sailors left here and went back to wherever they had come from. They went back to their previous duty stations. That is, except for a few of the officers. Some of the officers stayed here and became part of the officer corps for the CSS Neuse. And we're going to walk this way a little bit and talk to you a little bit about a couple of these officers briefly. Three of the officers that we have highlighted here came here as part of the Underwriter raid and stayed. Benjamin Loyal, who became commander of the CSS Neuse after the raid was over. Richard Bako, who was a lieutenant on board the ship. We know a lot of what we know about the CSS Neuse because of his diary and his letters. And Francis Lyle Hogue, who was the executive officer or second in command on the CSS Neuse. These three gentlemen all came here to Kinston as part of the Underwriter raid and ended up staying here as part of the CSS Neuse Officer Corps, and they played a vital role in the history of the CSS Neuse, even right up to her destruction. Now, if you want to know more about the Underwriter Raid or what's going on in eastern North Carolina in early 1864, I would really suggest that you pick up this book, Fight for the Old North State by Hampton Newsom. This covers events in coastal North Carolina from January through May of 1864. It's an excellent, excellent book. One of the best books I've read on the Civil War in North Carolina. I would highly recommend it, and it's just come out in a paperback edition as well. So if you want to know more about this time period in North Carolina's Civil War history, definitely pick up Fight for the Old North State by Hampton Newsom. It's an excellent read. You'll be glad you got it.